The Bee and the Rose. Once upon a time, there was a bumblebee who loved a flower. This was not so unusual, as bees often fall in love with the flowers in their gardens. But what was unusual was that this bee was in love with a rose. Roses, as you know, are the monarchs of the garden. They are too fine and lovely for common things like bees. But this rose was different from the others, and she loved her bee just as much as he loved her. One day the queen was walking through the garden and she said to the gardener, "From now on, I should like you to cut me a bouquet of roses every Sunday." The gardener promised he would do so. It was a simple enough request to him, but to the rose who loved the bee, it was terrible. "A bouquet of roses," she cried, "every Sunday. What will I do? I don't want to be cut and put in a vase with other roses. I want to stay out here in the good soft earth and be with my beloved bee." "Don't worry, my love," said her beloved bee. "I have a plan." The bee then flew to the place in the garden where the daisies grew. The daisies, like all the flowers, were fond of the bee, and when he asked for their help, they were only too happy to give it. Each one donated a few of their petals, which the bee took back to the rose, using some honey from his hive to stick them on. The bee used the petals to disguise the rose as a daisy. "That's odd," said the gardener the following Sunday. "Why is this one daisy growing among all these roses?" "Well, never mind. The queen wants roses, not daisies." So the gardener cut the queen her bouquet of roses, but left our rose safely behind. It worked, my love. The gardener thinks I'm a daisy. Then he is truly a great fool. Even through those daisy petals, your beauty shines like the sun. For many weeks the trick worked, and while her sisters were very honored to be cut and used to decorate the royal breakfast nook, our dear Rose stayed behind with her disguised petals and her true love, the brave and clever bee. But as time went by, the petals started to fall off one by one. Soon they would fall off altogether, and the gardener would see that she was really a rose. Then it would only be a matter of time before she too was cut and added to the queen's usually Sunday bouquet. "Why do you weep, my love?" said the bee. "Look," said the rose, "my disguise is falling apart, and you can't keep dressing me as a daisy forever. It's hopeless, my love." "Nothing is hopeless where there is love," said the bee, and before the startled eyes of the rose, the bee transformed into a beautiful fairy. "I'm sorry to deceive you," said the fairy. "I only meant to turn into a bee for a short time. But then I met you, a rose, the most beautiful, fragrant, and elegant flower in the garden. And yet you fell in love with a lowly bee. You truly have a good heart, beloved, and because of that, I will grant you any wish you desire." "Then I wish you would make me a daisy, a real daisy. Then I can stay here in the garden, surrounded by my sister flowers, and the gardener will never cut me for the queen's bouquet." "Are you sure it would mean giving up your life as a rose?" "I would rather be a daisy if it means I can be free and happy. If it means you will stay with me always," promised the fairy. And the rose did become a daisy, and she lived among the other daisies in the royal garden. And the fairy turned back into a bee so that they could be together just as they were before. Now you might think that it's better to be a rose than a daisy. You might also think that given the choice, you'd rather be a fairy than a bee. But I think if you really thought about it, you'd realize that the one thing you want to be most of all is happy.